I say God made Mammoth. Mother Nature takes care of it. She delivers the snow, she delivers the good weather, the bad weather. Whatever it takes. Every day there's a difference in the place you saw yesterday. It's kind of mystic in that aspect. The best skiing in the world, people try to tell me, and of course I back off a little bit and said, well, maybe that's possible.
On the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada mountains in California, the peaks thrust upwards with summits well over 14,000 feet. This range is higher than any other in the lower 48 states. It is a classic Western landscape, and no one belongs in this place more than Dave Mccoy.
I was here for a purpose, and I didn't always know what the purpose was, but I was always given help by people that wanted to be here like I did. And we just grew together, and it grew into what Mammoth is known as today. From nothing to something great.
As recently as the 1930s, no more than a handful of hardy souls would even attempt to scratch out a living in this place, where the snow starts falling in October and doesn't let up until May. Dave Mccoy saw it differently. Despite seemingly insurmountable obstacles, he accomplished here what everyone else said couldn't be done.
When you hear the legend of Dave Mccoy, it's a sort of Paul Bunyan character. It gets really larger than life, and many things about Dave are truly larger than life.
When the only boundary you know is the horizon, that's real freedom. And it's as infectious as malaria or anything else.
1935. Dave Mccoy is 20 years old and has come to the Eastern Sierra to find freedom and a new life. First stop, the small town of Independence.
I was headed for Jim's restaurant, and Jim, the owner, said, "We have a need for you right now, so put this apron on and start working." So I became dishwasher, garbage collector, waiter, whatever, in a short length of time. And I loved it all.
Dave was the new kid on the block, and it didn't take long before he caught the eye of a vibrant young girl named Roma Carriere.
Dave was a soda jerk, as they called it in those days, in a restaurant in Independence, and I was a high school cheerleader. So all of us stopped there to get ice cream sodas, and he waited on us. And I nudged a girl, and I said, "I wonder who that is." And she said, "I don't know, I think he's new in town." And I said, "Well, we got to find out."
And she was hopping around, singing and keeping them all going. And I thought, that's the gal for me, and I was really serious about it in my own mind.
But Dave was quiet and reserved, and he didn't speak with Roma that day. It would be more than a year before he saw her again. With the pretty cheerleader never far from his mind, Dave threw himself into his new life.
There was food on the table, a place to sleep at night, and new friends to meet every day. But I was an outdoor person, and here I was with an indoor job. It was fun, it gave me everything I needed. But at evening, around 9 o'clock usually when they shut the door, I'd go outside and I'd get in the alleyway and run and jump up and down and hoot and holler and say how free I was.
Dave's new friends urged him to explore that freedom in the vast backcountry that was right out their back door. Dave showed them a way to make it more fun.
Prior to going to Independence, I had learned how to ski, and I made my own skis, and that's why I really loved this country, because of the snow.
To find freedom on the side of a hill just by, if you will, climbing the hill and sliding down, that's all we asked for.
I don't know what they call a person like that to get out and do something different today, but we weren't crazy. We were crazy over the fun we were having, I guess. I'd put it that way. Like an afternoon picnic. Before TV, before radios, really, when families were families and families got together and enjoyed themselves, that's what skiing was. It was just a picnic for everybody, and get out and get a slope and try to ski on it.
But to ski down that slope, you first had to climb it. This limited the time you could spend skiing. The solution was just around the corner.
You know, there's an old axiom that the reason for a lot of good ideas is that you steal the idea and conceal the source of the theft. And I think this might apply when Dave and his half a dozen skiers in Bishop were climbing and they read about these rope tows.
The very first rope tow in the U.S. had recently been built in Vermont, and it was creating a buzz in the skiing community. Suddenly, it seemed possible to ski all day without ever having to climb the hill. Dave and his buddies managed to cobble together enough pieces and parts to build a rudimentary rope tow of their own. Skiing in the Eastern Sierra was never the same.
We put together a car chassis, stripped the wheels off of it and everything, and made a rope tow out of that.
On a good day, the rope tow would run all day without breaking. You know, the splices would fall apart. A shiv would fall off of a tree. The engine would stop. Then everybody just sit down for a little while and have lunch or whatever. But it required an awful lot of stamina. And imagine a piece of wet hemp, and you just had to squeeze really hard. Your hands worked like a clutch, and then you just hung on as long as you could. But hey, it beat climbing because you go up to 400 vertical feet in 2 or 3 minutes.
Despite the hardships of hanging on, the rope tows opened up skiing to anyone, and a new social activity was born: the ski club.
It was a bunch of crazy people that get together to go skiing. And they were so crazy they just wanted to have fun. And going up the hill was as much fun as coming down the hill. In fact, I think some people had more fun hanging onto the rope going uphill than they did struggling to get down the hill.
Ski clubs were starting to pop up all over Southern California, and Hollywood's answer to the new trend was the Wooden Wing Ski Club. This exclusive club was populated with a who's who of fame and fortune. The Hollywood elite had discovered the slopes of the Eastern Sierra. Even though Dave occasionally mingled with the rich and famous, he was always happiest out on the slopes, skiing. But despite his shy demeanor, he became a bit of a local celebrity himself.
Well, he used to ride through town on his black and white Harley in the wintertime with his skis strapped on the side, brown, really brown from the sun. And I would just swoon, of course. It's so stupid. It comes to pass that my brother knew him really well and had been fishing with him and skiing with him and hiking with him.
And the fair time came around, and some girl wanted me to take her to the fair, and I didn't want to do it. I'm not going to the fair or something else, right? I have another date, I guess is what I said.
And so she said, well, I'll see you there, and I want to meet this date. So he didn't know what to do. So he came to my brother and he said, I wonder if Rome would go to the carnival with me. So he asked me, and I said, sure, you bet. But I didn't know at the time he was just substituting me. That made me kind of mad later. But we just had so much fun. And after that, we were a couple. My grandmother would come out and say, Roma, you know, you don't want to get involved with this boy. And I said, why? He said, he's going to kill you.
Oh, we had so much fun, it's unbelievable. And she likes to tell how we'd be going down the road at 90 miles an hour, and she decided she wanted to be in front, and I just kind of step out on one peg and lean out a little bit.
I would go under the leg and get on the seat and grab the handlebars as we're going, and we didn't let up on speed. I'd have a fit if my kids had done that.
By 1937, Dave was ready to move on from his job at the restaurant. Some of his new friends worked as snow surveyors for the Department of Water and Power, and Dave admired their work.
When it snowed heavy that winter, they didn't have enough people that could ski to go to the base of the Sierra to measure the streams, and they found themselves in a tight spot, and one of the hydrographers says, well, Dave can do it.
A chance meeting in the drugstore with the head of the water department sealed the deal.
And I walked in, and he saw me. I just happened to have a little T-shirt on, and it was wintertime. And he said, Sonny, if you come to work for me, you're going to have to wear more than that. And I said, oh? And it was a little quiet. He says, I'll see you Monday.
Being a hydrographer was really the perfect job for Dave. Being able to be outdoors and get paid for it was really a dream come true for him.
You know, it took a lot of stamina, a lot of whatever you want to call it, to slog up 4,000 or 5,000 vertical feet and take snow samples and be out there for 3 or 4 days at a time. Come home, pick up a paycheck once a month, and then on weekends run rope tows.
Dave was exceptionally good at his new job, and he relished every moment he spent skiing into the backcountry. High up on the top of Mammoth Mountain, Dave also learned something about weather.
The winds coming across Mammoth are tremendous. Every year we'll register 180 mile an hour winds in the top of the mountain.
I'll tell you how we measure the wind. You know, most people have an anemometer and they read but if you're up there and there's just a small rock hitting you, well, it's not blowing too hard, but when they get up to ½ inch or 1.5 inches, they're rolling at you. You think it's picking up.
And then the big snowfall will come. It's wild, it's ferocious, and the snow's deep. There's very few places you can describe to anyone where you get 6 feet of snow overnight.
But Mammoth Mountain was still beyond the reach of the average skier. The place to go was the much more accessible McGee Mountain just south of Mammoth. Right next to the highway, the slopes of McGee made for a convenient spot to build a rope tow.
I needed some money to buy the motor and a little rope tow that I'd built for the Eastern Sierra Ski Club.
Dave went in a bank in Bishop, California, and tried to borrow $86 on his motorcycle to buy the parts for his first rope tow. The banker said, I won't do that because you can get on your motorcycle and go to Los Angeles and drink it up. So Dave left the bank. And the banker's secretary said, if you don't loan that nice young man that $86, I'm going to quit. The banker loaned Dave the money, and Dave married the secretary.
I loved every part of my life with him, and especially when he started introducing me to new things like the outdoors and the backcountry and fishing and hiking and skiing.
The newlyweds spent every free moment together outdoors. Dave challenged his new bride to come ski with him on Mammoth.
We would hike up there to go skiing, and when we got almost to the top, it was so steep that my knees would be hitting my face, and I was having a hard time with my skis, so he would always take my skis on the last part of it.
Dave's philosophies really are bringing out the best in other people and him inspiring them to understand themselves and their strengths and apply that to their world.
Then the first time I went off the cornice, Dave said, I just want you to look at it. Put your skis on, just look at it, and then just take off. So I said, okay. Got on my skis, and I went up and I looked, and I backed up. He said, what's the matter? And I said, I just need to look again. So I looked 3 times and backed up. And the next time I went up, he went and pushed me off.
Take the cat and hold it upside down and drop it and see it flip. That was a start.
But I made it. I didn't fall.
Together, Dave and Roma became the de facto king and queen of the region's budding ski community. Every weekend was devoted to improving their skiing and keeping the rope tows running. The fun did have its costs, however.
Nobody had to pay, and I was foolish enough to think that, well, if I start a rope tow, we can all go skiing, we can all have fun, and it won't cost that much. But there came a day when we didn't know whether we were going to eat that night.
So this one morning he said, we don't have enough money for gasoline for tomorrow, so you are going to have to charge for the people to ride. And I said, me? I can't do that. And he said, well, you have to.
It was kind of a difficult decision for me because I didn't like to take people's money.
So I said, well, how much do I charge? And he said, at least 50 cents a day. I said, what? He said, I can't do it, and I'm too busy. I'm up splicing the rope. So I did. I had to charge.
You know, it was a lot different in the 30s and the Depression, and they were both products of that. And they knew what it was like to be hungry, and what it was like to save and plan for the future.
Roma's little donation box filled up quickly. Turns out people were more than happy to help the McCoys keep their rope tow running.
I said, look, $15. I said, this might be a pretty good deal. He said, yeah, we eat tonight.
In the early 40s, ski racing became a serious pastime in the Sierra. Dave was also bitten by the bug, entering ski races every chance he got and blowing away the competition.
I know that when Dave came to the Silver Dollar Derby, everybody said, uh-oh, you know, wherever we were going to place, we're going to be one farther down. He'd be going, if you will, at the speed nobody could keep up with him, but he didn't look like he was going at all. He just was that smooth. He had it all together. No wasted motion.
Dave was quickly becoming the rising star in the world of ski racing. But then, disaster. 1942. Roma is expecting their first child, and Dave is on his way to enter a race at Sugar Bowl up near Lake Tahoe. Along the way, he spots another hydrographer working alongside the road.
So I stopped and went down and visited with him because that was very interesting to me to meet another guy that was doing the same work in a different area and see how he did it and why. And that made me a little late getting into Sugar Bowl to run the downhill. And I didn't have a pre-run on it to know what it was exactly like. But they let me start because of my record as a downhiller. And it was in the spring. It wasn't in the time you'd normally be running downhill like that. And as I went down the Eagle Run, it had a sharp right turn after a steep schuss. And as I approached it, the whole area right in there settled. And I hit it with my shin.
The phone call came that they were going to put him on the train from Sugar Bowl.
Took them about 4 hours to get me to Reno. I was in a mail car on the Southern Pacific Rail. They immediately said, this leg will have to come off. It'll have gangrene and no time.
And he said, I don't think so. So they came in and asked me, and I got really mad. I said, absolutely not. You're not going to touch that leg. You're going to set it. You're not going to amputate it.
They put me in the hospital, rigging over the top of the bed and put a sheet down from each side and laid my leg in it and left it that way.
For 3 weeks, Dave lay on his back, suffering, while the doctors waited for the Mccoys to give in and let them take his leg. His salvation came from a visiting doctor from San Francisco.
He said, I'd like to fix that leg. And he took 5 hours of just putting the bones together and wiring them together with platinum wire, and he said he thought it was going to be all right.
He went back to work at Crowley, and he could not walk, but he could get on his skis and ski to his clock stations, and when he'd get off his skis, he'd have to crawl over and change the water gauges, because he couldn't walk on it. And then he got back on his skis and could ski all these miles home. I mean, he did it. Now, who else would do that? He did it on that leg.
When Dave wasn't working at his job, he was supplementing the family's meager income by fishing and hunting. But his leg wasn't healing properly. It was time for a radical new approach.
I went back to the same doctors after, and they said, there's just too much gristle in the bone. It's never going to heal. So we'd like to do a bone graft. Well, whatever you want to do. It was okay with me.
They finally had to take the strip of bone out of his good leg, took the messed up bone in his bad leg and mashed it all up.
And packed that bone, the crushed bone, back into my right leg, put the graft piece in the left leg, and I started to get okay.
The gritty determination that led him to defy medical experts really served him well as he defied the experts of the ski industry and the resort business in the years after that.
Dave got back on his skis and back on the slopes. Not only was he entering races again, he was winning them. That competitive spirit pushed him always forward. Dave was more determined than ever to pick up where he had left off.
Well, being a breadwinner for a family the size we had and the income that we had, I had to have more than one job. I was a hydrographer a certain number of hours a day. I was cutting wood or guiding fishermen or hunters, and I was on the mountain building and trying to keep it going.
There's been several people in the industry that really thought outside the box, not very many. Dave thought way out of the box, and it came from his lifelong history of being a snow surveyor, spending most of his life in the Sierras.
But just when Dave got back to work on his rope tows, the snow started to disappear. McGee Mountain was no longer as reliable as it had once been. Rather than get discouraged, Dave packed up his equipment and moved it to higher ground.
And so he moved on up to Mammoth Mountain, and everybody said, Dave, you cannot overpower this much snow. I mean, 20, 30, 40 feet of snow. Those storms come powering, through San Francisco, across the San Joaquin, and they just go right up that valley, and they all get squeezed out right at the top of Mammoth.
Dave and others like him had proved that there was a reason for people to ski up here, so they brought in the experts.
But they said it was too remote, it was too cold, it was too alpine, it was too far away from anything.
No infrastructure, too expensive, and had awful weather. I mean, it snowed, which Dave thought was a pretty good idea for a ski resort, actually.
I've had too many good days by now, and I found myself so frequently on the backside and the north side of the mountain with a little rope tow and 200 or 300 people, and we were doing okay.
Mammoth's higher elevation did present a few new challenges. All that extra snow meant just getting to the lift wasn't as easy as it used to be.
We'd all be out of breath, and even though we were in a lot better shape in those days, and it would be a long slog into where you could then hang on a rope tow all day and stretch one arm and make it longer than the other.
Dave knew that if skiers couldn't drive into where he had set up the rope tows, he would have to find another way to get them there. The end of World War II provided him with a unique solution.
Imagine a Humvee without wheels, turned upside down, and that's a weasel. It has a set of tracks like a Caterpillar tractor. It's a World War II 10th Mountain Division vehicle. In deep snow, it was designed so that the bottom of it would actually slide on the snow. And I think there was a time when Dave bought some of them in the $100 range at surplus, because there wasn't a big, who wants a weasel, for God's sakes? What do I want a weasel for? The weasels were used for only one thing, and that was to get the people from the parking lot, where the snow got so deep that Dave couldn't plow it out, 1 to 3 miles, whatever length it is, to Base Lodge 1. And then they'd go back and pick up another load.
Yeah, we would seat 20, I think, on the weasel and have a rope a quarter of a mile long sometimes, towing the people behind us. And they were singing and all these great songs and having fun.
Dave provides the playground and the place where people can find freedom. We all had skis, we all had gravity, and every one of us was equal. And I think that Dave, in his infinite wisdom, leveled the playing field for all socioeconomic groups. Because somebody can come up working in a Century City high-rise as a hotshot $500 an hour attorney, and that doesn't make him turn his skis any better than somebody that's living in the parking lot in the back of their car.
As Dave continued to improve his operation, he also began coaching the local ski team.
He talks about how he taught the kids how to have fun, how to want to come to the mountain, how to see the things around them, to feel the things around them, to understand them. He talks about it more like it's education than it was an athletic experience. He sees the whole world completely differently.
If they didn't make the Olympic team, and if they didn't make the FIS team, which were their goals, some of them, if they only learned how to ski and have fun, that was enough for me.
Dave recognized the wealth of talent he had in not only the local men, but the women as well.
I think Dave was a pioneer with coaching women, and they always looked up to him. But he didn't coach them all alike. I mean, each one of them had different personalities, and different temperaments. So he'd have to do one girl he'd have to make mad, so she would do good, and another girl he would have to soothe.
One of those youngsters was a local teenager named Jill Kinmont. Like so many others before her, Jill began her racing career with very little experience on the slopes.
I didn't ever think about becoming a champion skier. I was just, wanting to have some fun and learn a few turns. Dave, all along the way, had been telling me that I was as good as they get, as good as anyone was. And all I needed to do is turn like this way or that way, whatever way I had done, made a good turn, and he would once again tell me, there you go, that's it. Do that every time and nobody will beat you.
Dave's young protege hit the racing scene like a whirlwind. Her good looks and girl-next-door charm put Jill Kinmont on the cover of Sports Illustrated. She was the darling of the ski world, but she was about to face a personal tragedy that would shock the nation.
It was at Alta, Utah, and it was one of the races that led toward the Olympic team. I just remember being up on top and Dave kind of, patting me on the back and roughing me up a little bit, just before getting into the starting gate and then taking off.
Well, what happened was that the wind was coming down the mountain instead of going up, and in those days your clothes made a lot of noise, and you could tell how fast you were going by how much noise your clothes made. Well, with the following wind, her clothes weren't making as much noise as she was used to, and she just got going too fast, hit a bump too hard, and the rest is history.
And I remember that, okay, right here's where I'm going to check my speed. And I thought, shoot, if I check my speed, I'll never win this race. And so I didn't. And when I hit the bump, I went up into the air and kind of threw me backwards.
The impact of the crash broke her spine. Jill was left permanently paralyzed from the shoulders down.
She was wonderful. And then when she had her accident, it was, almost more than Dave could bear.
But Dave has such character that he was able to carry it off and internalize it and deal with his own demons. And his solution was to help back up the Kinmont family financially and emotionally.
His influence continued to make me think of things that I could strive for and apply the same techniques of skiing into my new life.
While Jill threw herself into rehabilitation, Dave went back to the mountain and back to work. The popularity of skiing in California had exploded, and his little operation on the side of Mammoth was busier than ever. As skiers from Los Angeles flocked to the Sierra, the federal government decided it was time to expand Mammoth into a full-fledged resort.
The Forest Service put out a call to develop Mammoth, and not a single person or company applied. So the Forest Service was left with going to Dave and asking him what he could do.
I took out 2 pieces of paper and drew 3 lines on it and said, I think we ought to have 3 chairlifts here, here, and there. And we should do something with the road.
I knew he had this dream. And I knew it one day when we were riding in the Weasel. I was pregnant with one of them. And, and he stopped the Weasel and he said, see that hill over there, honey? And I sort of looked. Well, yeah, I can see a little. There's so many trees. And he said, well, that's where I'm going to have my first chairlift.
He put Mammoth Mountain on his shoulders and said, we're going to build a chairlift here. Nobody else even wanted to submit a bid to build a chairlift.
The Forest Service handed Dave the permit, and suddenly he found himself much closer to his dream. But he was at a crossroads. His job with the Department of Water and Power was taking up too much of his time.
We had 5 children and just had the 6th, and I come home and told Roma I quit.
I said, why? He said, because I don't think I can do both this job well and the ski area well, and I choose to do the ski area. I believe in this mountain, and I'm going to do it. One way or the other, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it.
It was a big gamble, I think, in other people's eyes, but I just worked to the point where I couldn't service my job like I thought I should, and I couldn't do the work on the mountain like I should.
Great things in history were accomplished by guys that believed that strongly and just wouldn't listen to other people doubting them. And, if Dave had, he would have quit millions of times, and he never did. It's lucky for us he didn't.
I mean, it was quite a task for a young boy that didn't have a cent to try to raise money for the first chairlift. I mean, they laughed at him.
The thing that not very many people know about is that that whole thing was done with plowed back earnings. He'd borrow money at the bank. He didn't have investors. He didn't have people saying, well, here's $4 million, put in 5 chairlifts.
With as much cash in hand as he could persuade the bank to give him, he rounded up his labor force and got to work. By 1955, Dave and his crew had built a new lodge, and then immediately started building chairlift number 1.
We had a 50-foot tower to build there. We built it on the ground. We lifted it up with a couple of telephone poles and a couple of cats, one pulling and one backing up to keep the cable tight.
There's no way it could be done today. Absolutely no way it could be done. The paperwork alone to get approvals to do it would be impossible. That would be a bigger mountain than Mammoth itself. I think it was impossible in those days, but Dave was used to doing impossible things.
We had a kind of a slogan after we got going a little bit that there were no excuses, and the impossible just took a little longer.
In order to fulfill his obligation to the Forest Service, Dave and his crew worked tirelessly to complete the work on Chair 1.
I saw less and less of him at that point on because he was working so hard. It was his dream, and he was doing it for us, and gosh, you can't be selfish when you're married and your guy has to work, he has to work. I used to take his lunches up to him and pile all the kids in the car and do that, and it was lots of fun to see his progress.
Dave always had a philosophy of, I have an objective to get done before I quit today. And he would always finish what he decided to get done that day. And if it got done at 4 o'clock or 4 the next morning, that's when he quit the job. First in, last out. That was Dave.
In the fall of 1955, after working around the clock for several days to complete it, Dave's first chairlift was ready.
When Chair 1 was finally completed and they had the big opening or whatever, I remember lots of people being there. And Roma and I rode up on the first chair. Dave was really excited that it was finally completed, that what he put a lot of time and effort and heart and soul into was finally finished. It was just a big happy day.
He had a goal and he did it, but nobody could have done it like he did. I truly believe that.
The completion of Chair 1 was a milestone. Dave had proven he could do it, and he and Roma were energized by the possibilities that lay ahead. They got back to work, building a resort.
The probability never even stuck in my head that you couldn't do it just because they said you couldn't do it, or whether it was just in spite that they said that we did succeed.
Every summer, Dave and his crews would work day and night to erect new lifts or make improvements on existing ones before the first heavy snows of the new season. Mammoth was getting bigger. Lifts were reaching higher. And in 1966, it was time to go to the top.
When Dave built the first gondola at Mammoth, the mountain didn't own a crane, didn't own the equipment to do it. And Dave's construction crew, kind of labor crew in those days, was a bunch of young teenagers.
It was made by a Swiss company with a handshake, and they said they would send professional builders and cable splicers over when it came time.
So these Swiss guys, looked at this as the absolute impossible project, and as I understand it, left. Just came, saw, and left because there was no way it was going to happen. And somehow Dave got them back, and by the time they came back, Dave had several of the towers set. He used long wooden logs as cranes and with pulleys and very complicated sort of Rube Goldberg rigging that Dave knew how to do. He was a genius at that kind of stuff, making do, not worrying about what impossible odds were in place. And he put up some towers that were way over 100 feet long. Dave, a few other men, and a bunch of teenagers. And it just drove the Europeans nuts, that this American wingnut had all these ideas that turned out to be much more innovative than theirs. That was impossible. At least the Europeans certainly thought it was impossible. Dave just thought it was another day of work.
That work never stopped, and Dave never rested. He was constantly looking ahead to improve and to expand.
From 1965 to 1972, Mammoth went from having 5 chairs to 14 chairs and 2 gondolas that took you to the top of the mountain.
Throughout the 70s and 80s, construction continued at a fever pitch, with sometimes as many as 3 new lifts opening in one season. Mammoth was growing exponentially, and with its increasing number of skiers, lodges and hotel facilities had to be upgraded as well. But timing is everything. After several years of large capital expenditures, the snow stopped.
A series of drought years led up to some high bank debt at the time.
And the company was, literally weeks away from having no money. My job was to explain to Dave that if we didn't change some things in the company, that we were going to go out of business and he was going to lose the company.
It was hard on him. It's about people. It's not about the money in his world.
We laid off 150 year-round employees in one day, many of whom had been with the company for more than 30 years. It was very painful. It was heartbreaking for Dave. He looked at the facts, he was objective about it, and he did what it took to survive.
While the company began the long process of reinventing itself, Dave decided he needed a way to protect his assets when the weather didn't cooperate.
Snowmaking came up. And in a usual Dave McCoy type of way, he would say, well, snowmaking, yeah, I guess, we had a bad year. But he knew that snowmaking technology had gotten somewhere. And he knew that somewhere we had to think about trying to do something with snowmaking.
We call it snow placement. If it comes too much, we move it out. If there isn't any, we make it and put it there.
You would always adapt things. There's things that are on snowcats, for example, as they grew through Mammoth, that once we put a gusset in 2 or 3 places, the representatives of that company would go, wow, that's a pretty good idea. And you would find those kind of adjustments put onto an assembly line floor of that manufacturer's product.
We built probably the best over snow piece of equipment I've ever seen, but we never did get into the manufacturing, or I never tried to get a patent on anything that we've invented or made.
Rather than take credit for his innovations, Dave was happy to pass them on to the manufacturers. To him, running a resort was more about the people.
I always stayed in the lift line and talked with people, and that's where a lot of the ideas come from. All the ideas of running Mammoth didn't come from me. It came from the public. It didn't come from me telling an employee what to do. It came from the employee doing what he felt was right for the people he was serving. And that's Mammoth.
It was ultimately how we got into snowboarding, because it became so obvious that our visitors from Southern California wanted to snowboard that we finally made the decision and overcame the objections of all of our lawyers and allowed snowboarding in the early 1990s.
You know, years ago, there's some pretty humongous rocks at Mammoth that, you know, kids were jumping off of. And for a while there were signs on every one of them, no jumping allowed, no jumping allowed. And now they have this great snowboard park, and the guys are going 900 feet in the air and, you know, doing quadruple hoopy doopies, and jumping is a completely accepted thing.
It wasn't business analysis. It was really just listening to people and what they like to do. And Dave always felt that it was his job to give people what they wanted on the lands that were under our permit.
I don't see a right or wrong to snowboard or skis. I see a freedom vehicle. I put it in my films 30 years ago because the young guys were doing things on snowboards that skiers had never been able to do. And they were climbing to higher places, jumping off of bigger stuff, and they had an unbelievable smile on their face while they were doing it, which is all about freedom.
Today, millions of people from all over the world flock to Mammoth to experience the freedom that comes from soaring down the mountain, whether on a snowboard, a pair of skis, or even a set of tires.
It's not very well known, but Dave's probably done as much for mountain biking as he has for skiing with that. Yeah, Kamikaze downhill are what, 4 miles? Yeah, top to bottom, 4 miles, and there's an under 4-minute club, which means you're averaging 60 miles an hour coming down Mammoth Mountain on a mountain bike. It's all freedom oriented. There's no score. You can go up there and charge down the back of Mammoth and make that right turn and go straight for those 4 miles, and if your IQ is low enough, you'll get there under 4 minutes.
At the core of Dave's motivations lies a constant search for freedom. And if he has a passion for something, he wants to share it with everyone. He wants others to taste that same freedom. His love of motorcycles led him to start a motocross event at Mammoth that continues today. In typical Dave McCoy fashion, the event has become one of the most popular in the country.
Great setting, just grew from a one-day event in the 60s to a 2-day event in the 70s to now over a week-long event.
Like so many things at Mammoth, the motocross got started with one goal in mind: to have fun. As with his ski racing, Dave embraced motocross completely and became a serious competitor himself.
To this day, my grandpa, he'll walk up to the top of the Mammoth downhill. He's got his platform that the crew sets up for him every year. It's the best viewing spot of the track. You can see the whole track, all but one turn on the entire track. So he never misses a beat when he's up on his platform.
Year-round, the once tiny settlement of Mammoth Lakes now boasts a thriving community, of which Dave and Roma have been a key part. A brand new college bearing their name is just one in a long line of contributions to the place they love.
When Dave came to Mammoth and started doing his thing, there were either 3 or 6 year-round residents in the village of Mammoth. You have to think about this. In those days, there was no water system, there was no police department, no fire department, no hospital, no grammar school, no junior high, no high school, no city government. And under his guidance and financial commitment, almost everything about Mammoth has Dave's behind-the-scenes imprint on it.
Dave knew that was also a community. He had a family. He knew the value of having all those little things that make a community.
Those people are special to him, and he wants to see everybody succeed. If he could take care of everybody in town, he would.
Dave was standing up, so this is at 11,053 feet, and he was looking to the west where the storms come in. And he stood there for, well, he was standing there when I got there, and he was standing there when I left, and decided not to have a conversation with him that day because he was having a conversation with himself, I think.
When I went up to the top of the mountain by myself and reflected back, how in the world did we do it? With kids, journeymen, and what little equipment we had. And that's probably one of the times I was really overwhelmed by just thinking back a little bit. I'm not one to look back. I'm not one really to talk about history, because tomorrow is another day that has to be met with success. Well, I think people look at me today and say there is a character there. So that never bothered me one way or another. Because after you're being told you're crazy and you can't do something, being a character probably fits in pretty good.
And he's worked since he was 10 years old on his own, and he had a vision. And he knew what that vision was going to be.
Dave didn't spend a lot of time talking about what his vision was, talking about developing the mountain. He just did it.
He loves to share the freedom that he has created. He loves to see the smile on people's faces. He loves to hear them shout with laughter when they get down at the bottom of the hill. He likes to see little kids come back 4 years later and they're champions.
Let's try that the other way.
And he just always look and always smile and go, well, you had a good time anyway, huh? And you'd say, yep, we sure did. We had a lot of fun.
Dave McCoy's legacy will live on in these mountains. As he continues to look towards higher peaks, he leaves his beloved Mammoth in the hands of those who have followed him. But Dave will always be a part of this place. Anyone who comes here can't help but feel his spirit all around them.
Now probably he'll find some other challenge. I know he's already started on that in his mind. So what it'll be, I don't know, but it'll be fun, whatever it is.
Because we do have lots of fun. We go a lot of places, and I think we have fun every day. Even when we didn't have anything, we had fun.
I was never afraid of his choices in our life. If he wanted to change anything, I was never afraid, because he's the man, boy. He knew what he was doing, and he was it for me, and I just trusted him with my life.
Oh, hey, she's the best partner a person could ever have. And I tell her that most every day.
If you give her one, she'll love you.
She's an inspiration to me.
There'll never be another Dave McCoy. Never, ever in this world.
What makes me happy? Every day. When I put my feet on the floor in the morning, I'm darn good, glad that I'm alive and can move. And that starts it. I haven't got any better sense than to be happy.